Hello, you're watching Inside Politics. I'm Anastasia Lavrina. The ongoing negotiations between Azerbaijan and Armenia are focused on reaching a long-term peace agreement. The talks have intensified following years of conflict, and there is growing international pressure for both sides to reach a consensus. A potential peace agreement would not only end decades of hostilities, but also open the door for significant economic cooperation. Both nations stand to benefit from increased trade, joint infrastructure projects, and access to regional energy markets, which could promote stability and development for both countries, as well as enhance connectivity between Europe and Asia. More on this we will talk with our two experts. Joining me now is Ahmad Alili, Director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Centre, and Arman Grigoryan, Associate Professor, International Relations Department, Lehigh University. Well, welcome to our program.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation itself.
Ahmad, let me start with you. What is the current state of affairs in the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process? Are you surprised by the fact that a peace agreement doesn't seem to be an imminent eventuality?
And I believe that it's quite normal that in each process we have ups and downs, and it's quite normal that Armenian-Azerbaijan peace process, it has its own ups and downs. For some time, we would see that the sides are quite aggressive toward each other, but now I would say that we are witnessing the positive wave of the development, especially with the alphabet diplomacy. I mean, in Kazan, when President Aliyev and the Prime Minister questioned, they were sitting next to each other because of the alphabetic order, and that helped them to get closer and start talking to each other, which led to the meeting. And that meeting was unannounced and unexpected, one frankly speaking, but that created quite a positive wave of developments between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But also, recently we witnessed that Armenian MFA and quite high-ranking other officials from Armenia, they made quite positive statements about the 2 out of 3 articles that caused the problem in the past. That those articles, they are quite at least 2 of them, it's okay, and that there is a certain agreement reached on that. But also we saw social media sharing from the Mr. Shafiev, the head of the AnewZ Center, who was a bit skeptical on certain issues. So I would say that now we are witnessing a certain public dialogue, I would even say. There are issues that Armenia would want to see slightly different. There are issues Azerbaijan want to see slightly different. But the fact is that Baku and Yerevan stays at the negotiation table, and they continue talking to each other, and it gives quite a lot of hopes to that there will be a positive development in the future also. I believe that if there is no even a peace deal, if there is no signed document, the other most important issue right now is who is going to attend COP29 from Armenia. Even if there is a signed peace deal, I believe that it's going to help Armenia Azerbaijan to keep the positive wave in the process if someone from Armenia attends COP29 in Baku. So right now, the American diplomats, they sent the American president, Joe Biden, he sent a letter to the sides. And there were quite a positive moments, I would say that. And the deadline right now is not COP29, but end of the year. So that means that Armenia attending COP29 gives more chances for the peace deal to be signed in the months or years following COP29.
So Arman, will be nice to know your opinion on the same question. Before, the experts were trying to predict whether two sides, Armenia and Azerbaijan, will be able to sign the peace agreement before or during COP29. And now there is another question whether two parties are willing to achieve the consensus and sign the peace treaty till the end of this year.
To whether it will be signed by the end of this year, I'm also not so sure about. I agree with Ahmad that there has been a slight change of tone and atmosphere in recent weeks, but I should also point out that in the same Kazan meeting, when journalists approached the two leaders and asked what the state of affairs is, what the situation is with the negotiations, the Armenian Prime Minister's response was a lot more optimistic than the Azerbaijani president's. And Pashinyan said, I'm not quoting him verbatim, that we have only a few issues resolved and we're getting close. Mr. Aliyev, by contrast, said that there are still certain unresolved issues. In addition to these statements, we also observe something else, which is taking place already for quite some time in these negotiations, and that is the progressive escalation of demands and the emergence of new demands on the part of Azerbaijan. Now, there were some issues that have been obstacles to progress in the negotiations since the beginning, since the signing of the ceasefire, such as the status of the communications linking mainland Azerbaijan with Nakhichevan through southern Armenia. But new issues have appeared, and new demands have been articulated by the Azerbaijani side, including things like the return of the Azerbaijani refugees to Armenia. In fact, Mr. Aliyev, in one of his recent statements, didn't even call it Armenia. He stated that they should return to Western Azerbaijan, and demands and talks about Armenia's possible demilitarization and change of the constitution is another demand that has been presented in an ultimatum form. So we could probably extend this list longer, but while the tone has changed, any observer could easily see that there is also this progressive escalation of demands, which does not give us the positive signals that we expect about the imminent signing of a peace treaty. Now, if I may, I would like to add one more point. I mean, we tend to think of this process as purely an Armenian-Azerbaijani process, as a process where Armenians and Azerbaijanis have to negotiate and come to an agreement. But I think one of the main reasons why Armenia and Azerbaijan have failed to reach an agreement up to this point is the geopolitical uncertainty in the region, because this is not merely a process and an issue that affects Armenia and Azerbaijan. Whatever Armenia and Azerbaijan do or whatever agreement they reach is going to have repercussions for other actors as well. And it is no secret that especially after the escalation of the war in Ukraine, the geopolitical competition between major potential third parties that have interests and that could become alternative providers of guarantees or alternative mediators have been engaged in what one can easily call a zero-sum competition with each other. And that could not have failed to affect the negotiating process negatively.
Ahmad, what do you think? What are the key obstacles and how could they be surmounted?
Yeah, I agree with Arman that the geopolitical context is really important here, so it's going to affect the process also. But Armenia and Azerbaijan, they try to make it a bilateral process, and I believe that they did partially. We can call them successful. But I believe that if you are looking to the process, the key obstacles, both sides, they have their own list of the obstacles that they want to clear out. And from Azerbaijan side, it's mostly about changing the Armenian constitution or overall legislative basis of Armenia. Because in Armenia, there is not only constitution, but there are other documents that basically creates a lot of obstacles for Azerbaijan. Some of them might be changed by changing constitution, but some of them might be changed by the certain decisions by the parliament. So I believe that these obstacles, and the President Aliyev several times talked about that, and quite high-ranking other officials in Azerbaijan, they also mentioned this point that that is the main obstacle for Azerbaijan right now. That's the vision from Azerbaijan. But also, I would love to mention that still the trust is quite important, or the lack of trust is quite an important point in this process, because Azerbaijan doesn't believe that the whole process is not a, let's say, Armenia is not going to abuse the process and in the future deny the results of the process, right? So from Armenian side, there were certain voices saying that whatever Nikol Pashinyan is going to sign, or Prime Minister Pashinyan is going to sign these days, Armenia in the future might announce that all of it will be done under the, with the Azerbaijan pressure under the gun. So that is the reaction from Armenia. So, and that creates a lot of negative perception in Azerbaijan side about the Armenian contribution to the peace process. So I believe that this issue also should be addressed.
Arman, actually, this is a very important question. The issue involving the territorial claims embedded in Armenia's constitutional system, given that a referendum to remove these won't happen before late 2026. What shall be the focus of the parties now?
Okay, so the constitution issue has been discussed quite intensely in recent times by both expert communities and diplomats and journalists in both countries and elsewhere. And it is, I mean, it's interesting because this issue appeared as an obstacle in the negotiating process quite late. If you look at the history of the negotiations, there were only three issues that were the main kind of groups of issues. One was the delimitation problem, the other one was the status of Karabakh before September 2023. That was an issue, and the third one had to do with the communications through southern Armenia, its legal status, and the elements of its regime. These were the three issues, and for a couple of years, nobody mentioned the constitution as being a major obstacle. Now, what I can say about in this regard is that, first of all, the Armenian Constitutional Court has issued an opinion that this does not obligate the reference in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, where that territorial claim is articulated. By the way, let's remember that the context was different at the time of the Declaration of Independence. Both countries were still part of the Soviet Union. They were operating under Soviet legislation, etc., etc. But be it as it may, there is such a reference in the preamble, and the Armenian Constitutional Court has issued an opinion that it does not imply territorial claims. It does not obligate the Armenian state to pursue such a policy. However, even regardless of that opinion, the Armenian leadership has shown some flexibility on this issue recently. I mean, if you look at some of the recent statements, they seem to be inclined to revise the constitution and to put it to a referendum. I mean, there are other reasons why the constitution may need revisions, and Armenia may need, or the current government may be interested in revising the constitution. But on this issue, there has been a flexibility shown by the Armenian government. They have not shut the door on it. They have not issued any statements that that's out of the question. One other thing I would like to point out in this context, I already made a passing reference to this. At the same time that the Azerbaijani leadership, including Azerbaijan's president, are expressing anxieties about potential territorial claims by Armenia and demanding guarantees that such claims would not be in the form of revising the constitution, at the level of the president, they're talking about Western Azerbaijan and the right of Azerbaijanis to return to what was their homeland. And the issue is not the right of return of these people, of this population, but the references at the level of the president to the sovereign territory of Armenia as Western Azerbaijan. So I think there is a bit of a double standard in the Azerbaijani discourse about potential territorial claims from Armenia and how important it is to revise the constitution. Now, we're pressed for time. I probably should limit my comment to this, but there are, of course, other serious obstacles. And as I pointed out, the geopolitical context is very important. I think the geopolitical context has allowed Azerbaijan to exploit Armenia's weakness without much of a deterrent effect of a geopolitical reaction to it, reaction from other states. The fact that Russia has been preoccupied in Ukraine has meant that Azerbaijan has been able to pursue a harder line. Armenia has expressed some frustrations with the lack of support from Russia and sought partners in the West, which has exacerbated the problems with Russia further. So, and after the escalation of the war in Ukraine, there has been some encouragement for Armenia to change its geopolitical orientation, which also has complicated things. So if these issues are settled, if there is more of a consensus reached between the United States and Russia, if there is a movement toward reducing tensions and kind of a new détente between Russia and the United States, I'm hoping that this geopolitical uncertainty will go away or will be reduced, and there will be more of a framework, more of an opportunity for Armenia and Azerbaijan to get serious with the negotiations.
Ahmad, would you like to respond to the answer of Arman? What do you think about the position of Azerbaijan?
So I would say that the sides tend to mirror each other's position. Sort of successful positioning on issues the other sides here in the sector. So I believe that the Western Armenia concept, it was quite popular in Armenian public narrative, and with that also in Azerbaijan would be seen as slightly against Turkey and Azerbaijan at the same time. So I believe that the sides are copying each other, trying to mirror each other. And there are points, for example, Prime Minister Pashinyan also wanted to attend the BRICS summit, and knowing that it's going to get a lot of negative reaction from the partners in the European Union and the United States. But since Azerbaijan at first expressed its wish to be part of the BRICS, so its sides tend to copy each other, mirror each other. And I believe that in this context, in the future, we are going to see the issues this trend is going to continue in the future also. And the return of the Karabakh Armenians in Armenia, of course, like Azerbaijan tries to balance it with its position, return of the Western Azerbaijanis, like the Azerbaijanis left the Armenian territory also. So this is one of those ups and downs that we are going to witness in the process. But frankly speaking, I believe that this is quite positive that we can talk about this issue right now. In the past, it wouldn't be part of the negotiation process, but talking about that means that we can reach certain agreement on those issues also.
Ahmad, one more question to you. What are the self-evident economic benefits of normalization for both countries?
The economic benefits are immense, of course. Like, I would love to have economic researchers to speak on this issue, but those benefits are so apparent that I believe that we can talk about these issues. The issue is that during certain times, Armenian and Azerbaijan economies, they were quite interconnected. And because of this conflict, or interconnected links, they got broken. There are quite many facilities in Armenia, factories in Armenia. In the certain times, they were linked to factories in Azerbaijan and vice versa. So I believe that the restoration of those links is going to help a lot Baku and Yerevan to boost their economic performance a lot. And of course, it's quite evident that once Armenia and Azerbaijan reach certain consensus on the issue, the region is going to become quite attractive place for the international investment. And with this, I would say that it is not about Armenia-Azerbaijan economy anymore. It's also about the regional economy. So once these issues are resolved, I would say that we can talk about the joint Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan and cooperation on many issues, and that's going to triple the economic, let's say, the effect that we can have from this cooperation. So that's why I would not limit it to the only logistical corridors, but of course they are quite important part of it. Without having those logistical connections, you cannot build a sustainable economic connection. And I believe that with those logistical infrastructure being there, being present, for the wider, for the investors outside of the region, for everyone. That's going to help Armenia and Azerbaijan a lot, but it's going to help Georgia and the Georgian-Armenian relations, Georgia-Azerbaijan relations. There will be completely new dynamics in these relations.
Arman, the same question to you. Economic cooperation and the benefits to countries and the region itself may win in a case of achievement of peace agreement by two sides, Yerevan and Baku.
Before I answer the question, just a brief response to something Ahmad said about Armenian claims regarding Western Armenia. There has been no case of such claims and such discourse at the official level. Even by some accounts, the most hardline Armenian leader, who was Robert Kochayan. Robert Kochayan was the person who stated quite unequivocally during one meeting in Istanbul, actually, that Armenia has no territorial claims against Turkey. So it's one thing to think about discourse between some historians or nationalist groups, etc. It's a totally different thing when such discourse is also characteristic of leaders of the state. Now, about the economic connectivity, it is obvious. I don't think any serious person can dispute that there are obvious benefits to the opening of communications and economic interaction and cooperation between any two neighboring countries. Neighboring countries usually are each other's most obvious and most easily accessible markets. So I think one does not need to be a seasoned economist to make the case that the lifting of obstacles to economic cooperation will benefit both Armenia and Azerbaijan, and I agree also the larger region, and it will benefit everybody immensely. The problem is, and I'm going to put on a hat of an IR professor here, the problem is that sometimes people who talk about economic connectivity and economic interaction and economic interdependence, they do not connect it to other contexts, particularly the security context, and often it is presented as, irrational on the part of countries who fail to engage in such cooperation, but it is not irrational. I mean, countries can have natural and serious problems having to do with their national security, which may prevent economic cooperation. It is not because they don't understand it, it's because there are other reasons why they do not cooperate. So sometimes we confuse the cause and the effect. Sometimes the cause is the existence of problem and the effect is the lack of economic cooperation. And simply talking about the benefits of economic cooperation is not going to convince parties unless these security issues are resolved. So I don't think we should have the strategy or the approach where we kind of go to Armenians and Azerbaijanis and explain to them how much better things will be if they cooperate with each other, unless that conversation is also put in the larger context of resolving their mutual security concerns and political concerns. That conversation will probably be seen as patronizing and fall on deaf ears.
Ahmad, how could this sense of urgency be instilled into the negotiations?
The amount of the work that Baku and Yerevan should work on is huge. And once, considering the amount of the issues that Baku and Yerevan, the Azerbaijan and Armenian societies should work on in the future. So that's why, expecting that most of those issues going to be fixed with signing certain peace deal, I don't think that is the expectation we should have in Armenia and Azerbaijan. But at the same time, there is a certain document, it should be signed as soon as possible, at least framework agreement, or as President Aliyev proposed, the agreement consisting the main principles. The thing is, right now, in Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process, we are in a stage when there is no document that can regulate this process. So in the past, it used to be a three-party statement, but basically that document is quite outdated right now. So, and there is no rules-based negotiation process right now between Baku and Yerevan. So that's why there must be certain documents, even not a peace agreement, or even not a brief version of the peace agreement, or some document should be signed between Baku and Yerevan, so that the negotiation process between Baku and Yerevan can be rules-based game. So that's why I believe that certain issues we should keep it for the future generations. Even we have to gradually solve them, and it's impossible to find solution for certain problems. But of course, there are certain issues that I believe that Baku and Yerevan should discuss, especially we both were, Arman and myself, we were talking about the geopolitical context, right? Now geopolitical context favors signing certain issues. What about the future? So it's also another issue that we have to take into account.
Arman, the same question to you. If we are talking about the negotiation process and the achieved results, as for now, the peace agreement has been agreed by 80%, and Armenian side is ready to sign the document now, while Azerbaijani side is insisting on achieving the agreement by 100%. So do you think that the countries should concentrate on what has already been achieved, or should the parties purchase the policy of fixing one element at a time policy and then move on?
I wouldn't concentrate on the specific issue, whether it's a good idea to sign some agreement where 80% of the disagreements are resolved and there are some remaining issues. I mean, it could be 95% resolved and 5% remaining issues. And after signing an agreement, the disagreement over the 5% may still destabilize the situation and kill the peace treaty and lead to new escalation. So the key problem is whether Armenia and Azerbaijan can reach an agreement that could provide for stability. In other words, that could create a condition where even if they are not happy about certain things, it is better to resolve these things peacefully, and it is better to gradually open up the countries to cooperation and to have a commitment for peace and normalization with each other. I mean, any peace agreement is not going to end the problems between the countries. Even allies have problems with each other. There is going to be a continuous negotiation and engagement over many issues between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but the kind of issues that are serious obstacles to normalization of relations, I think my own preference is that they should be resolved before a peace agreement is signed, because I don't want the peace agreement to be discredited by a new escalation. I don't want the peace agreement to be killed because the unresolved issue led to a new conflict. I mean, remember what happened in the Armenian-Turkish normalization talks when they kind of rushed and signed the protocols, but certain issues were left out, and they kind of hoped that these issues would be resolved in the future, but the issues were not resolved, in fact, and the process collapsed as a result, and actually it made things worse than if the process had not reached the point of signing those documents. So again, my response is not about what percentages have been agreed upon and at what level of agreement they should necessarily sign a peace agreement. They should do so when they're confident, when both parties are confident that there won't be new escalation, and whatever remaining conflicts or disagreements exist, they can be approached as technical matters, as matters of everyday life and everyday negotiation between two neighboring countries.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Just to remind you, watched Inside Politics. Stay with us and see you in the next edition. you.